Good evening, everybody. I'd like to tell you a story this evening around the London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games and how we went about creating all the venues, the parks, and everything that went towards creating outrageous games for both Olympics and Paralympics. Key themes that I think I'd like to touch on are what we had to achieve by way of the park, village, the £5 billion of venues, and then restaging the games. Then secondly, how we led it and program managed it. And then lastly, some of the lessons I personally learned during that period of my life. Now, the Lower Lee Valley is where the Olympic Park was created. It's an area of old industrial estates, old factories, car breakers' yards, and very much an industrial part of East London, but it's very tight in the centre of town. Our particular site was about 2.5 kilometres long by about 1.5 kilometres wide, and embraced the old facilities, rivers, roads, railways, and was generally a derelict area. And our challenge was to create something that looked like this in early 2006 into something that could host a phenomenal Olympic and Paralympic Games which would welcome 10 million spectators. Our task was to transform those 200 hectares of brownfield land, to reinstall bridges, to create 14 permanent and temporary venues, new roadways, to create new parks, and all the venues that would be needed for 2012. Our delivery strategy was driven by the key challenges we faced. The first of those was a very clear deadline. Everything had to be ready for the opening ceremony on the 27th of July 2012. It was a publicly visible and publicly funded project. And therefore, that means that we had to be very transparent and very clear in what we were doing and how we were progressing. We had not just to complete and make the venues work for games time, but also then leave behind a legacy for the east of London and the nation as a whole. The sheer size of the programme, some £7 billion in its complexity, meant that we had to acquire some delivery partners. If we succeeded, then there'd be a huge global reputation increase. But if we failed, it would be appalling for everyone concerned. To the left-hand side of the panel is the geometry of the park that we created for the Games in 2012. To the south, you see the main stadium, the aquatic centre, basketball, velodrome, broadcast centre, and the village. And then to the right-hand side of the panel, this is what the site was designed to look like in legacy mode, with much more parkland, the temporary venues dismounted, and housing taking its place. When we inherited the site, a lot of our preliminary works were around dropping power lines and creating the platform against which we could then build out the venues themselves. That included extensive excavations for archaeological remains from the Norman and Roman eras, including going further back than that into the Bronze Age settlements. The site itself was fairly contaminated, and therefore, as part of our programme, we went about understanding how much of the site was contaminated by drilling boreholes at 10-metre intervals, removing unexploded bombs, and then moving about 1.5 million cubic metres of muck to create the new land profile for the park and the venues themselves. The area itself needed a whole set of new energy centres and networks to power up the venues, the housing, the villages and the retail centres. That included, for the Olympic Park itself, the village, Stratford retail zone, and that was all via two energy centres, one to the left, west, one to the right in the east. Each of these were trigeneration centres doing heating, cooling and electrical power at the same time. Over and above that, we had to then overcome a lot of the isolation of the site, building temporary and permanent bridges that would be then just downsizable in legacy mode. Thence building a whole new park and floodplain with formal gardens, informal gardens, wildflower meadows and such like. And by 2012, all the permanent and temporary venues were in place, ready to host the games themselves. Now, to achieve this mission, we decided very early on in the programme that we would create a client organisation that will be intelligent, assertive, and really lead the delivery of this programme. We decided very clearly to run a big programme management exercise with an ethos of delivering its time, budget, and quality. We contracted in a big programme delivery partner to help us, and then hired in the world's best engineers and designers to support a 30,000 strong workforce delivering the programme itself. At the highest level, London 2012 had a single programme, but beneath that had 19 major projects, nearly 1,000 planning applications, 135,000 documents, 50 engineers trained a week coming in and out with materials. It's a phenomenal size. But the tools and techniques we used were very similar to those that you have and will be using as you start your careers. We had a work breakdown structure. It was big, 69 big projects, 1,000 elements in the work breakdown structure. But it's the same sort of thing that's necessary for a project regardless of size. We chunked our programme into big elements year by year. So the first year was all around planning and acquiring the land. The second year was around demolishing buildings, dropping power lines, creating the landform and doing the designs. And then 3 years of building, the foundations, the structures and then the overlays, allowing us the final year to test and commission everything ready for the games. Underlying that, we had a very big, extensive programming system based on Primavera P6, which rolled up from lower levels right up through to the level 1 program, through levels 2, levels 3, at an individual level itself. Some of the key tools we used were some decision rules. So at any time, we knew precisely what the last responsible date for action was. So when do we need decisions to be taken by? We focused on the big stuff, the 20% of things that will make 80% of the difference. And thirdly, we focused on the time float, because every time that the minutes and days are eroded, increases risk and increases cost. Secondly, we focused on those things that were important at the particular time and being flexible and adjusting as we went. And lastly, we tried to keep things very simple. Try and eliminate jargon, be clear, concise, and be very, very transparent in your reporting. We did use some very sophisticated systems, such as earned value for both schedule and cost purposes, which rolled up from the very bottom right up to the top level. This was most of use to us at the start of the programme. But as time went by and you can start to measure the physical progress, then that started to dominate. A key thing for us and any other programme is all around managing risk and contingency. So at the start of the programme, we were very clear around what the prime costs were, what the fees would be, and then the contingency would allow. And then as you move through delivery phases, understanding how much contingency you've got left, what trends you've got, how you're going to mitigate risks, such that you drive then towards an anticipated final cost that will work. From a schedule perspective, we had our all milestones report. Beneath that, the project status reports, the critical items reports, the critical paths, and then the overarching strategic plan itself. And that was then thrown up into the key components of our project status report. Our health and safety, our earned value, how we were doing against milestones, how we were doing in terms of cost and our anticipated final cost, how we were doing on the key themes such as safety, employment and skills, and then what are the decisions coming through. Now this wasn't created all at once, this whole programme management capability. It built up gradually over time, over those 6 years of building. And I guess it took us until about year 2.5 to really get everything under control and everything working properly. For us, engaging the supply chain, the contractors that will deliver the programme was vital, and in particular creating enough interest in amongst the tier ones to actually bid sensible prices for the programme itself and creating the right environment of a collaborative working dynamic. A key decision for any contract is the form and nature of the contract we choose. We chose the NEC form of contract with a target cost with value for gained and value paid, such that the contractor could earn extra profit or would suffer loss. And fundamentally, it was all around getting a contract that worked both for the client and also for the contractor themselves. What that meant is we had very low levels of liquidated damages. Any contract or program of the size that we were talking about will require levels of assurance. For us, we had 3 levels of defence: external, internal, and in contract itself. And it's all around managing risk and ensuring that things are delivered effectively. In the end, the summer of 2012 was brilliant. And as we would say, sports day went well. All the venues were packed out with people roaring their lungs out, cheering their respective nations on to victory in all the various events, not just in the stadiums, but across London and across the whole of the nation. On any one day, up to 300,000 people enjoyed the park, not just for the sports venues themselves, but also the live sites, where people would walk around, watch stuff on the televisions, go into a venue, go to the merchandising, and visit the various exhibits that were in place. The Athlete Village, which housed 20,000 athletes and team officials, was secure, safe, and performed well for all concerned, and has now been turned into a new residential quarter for London, particularly the East. We had succeeded. We built everything on time. We delivered some £7 billion worth of infrastructure and venues, actually below budget by about £1 billion. It was fit for purpose. It worked in terms of safety. It was roughly 10 times safer than any other major comparable construction site. It was highly sustainable. We created new skills and employment opportunities in some of the most deprived communities in the whole of the country. Or we left behind a legacy for the nation itself. For me, there seem to be a number of key things and lessons that I learned. The first thing is that there is no single magic bullet to delivering a program, and certainly not a program of this size. It's a combination of getting lots of things right, but fundamentally underneath it is how the leadership team of the program take what would be called extreme ownership of that mission and have that determination, grit and drive to achieve the outcomes on time, on budget, on quality, regardless of what is thrown at them. Secondly, it's all around getting the right people at the right time, at the right place, with the right capability for each phase of the program. And adjusting as you go, people coming and going to meet the needs at a particular time. Set yourself a realistic but challenging budget. Manage both the pounds and manage the time like crazy. Plan, integrate and manage those issues as much as you possibly can. If you're in doubt, do some deep dives, do some shallow dives, check it, kick the tires. But all the time, understand the risks, get the controls in place and make certain you're on the ball. Ultimately, it's a team game. You're on the ball. Ultimately, it's a team game.